closing days of April 1943, Allied reconnaissance units operating near Tunis, Tunisia, stumbled upon an extraordinary find in an olive grove, an abandoned but completely intact and operational German Tiger tank, designated Tiger 712. This discovery would later be hailed by intelligence officials as the single most valuable intelligence acquisition of the entire North African campaign. The massive heavy tank stood silent among the gnarled trees, its formidable 88-gun stationary. The crew had evacuated in such haste that they neglected to destroy the vehicle, leaving no demolition charges in place. Amid the disorder of a total military collapse, Germany had inadvertently delivered its most dreaded weapon system, fully intact, into Allied hands. The insights gained from this 60-ton steel behemoth would ultimately prove more significant than the destruction of a dozen Tigers in direct combat. While the tank showcased Germany's engineering prowess, it also laid bare a crucial strategic flaw, not in its armor protection or firepower, but in its staggering fuel consumption, which rendered sustained military operations over long campaigns nearly impossible. The North African campaign concluded disastrously for Axis forces. Between May 7 and May 13, 1943, roughly 230,000 German and Italian troops capitulated in Tunisia. The Afrika Korps was entirely wiped out as an effective fighting unit. Among those surrendering were remnants of the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, an elite German armored unit equipped with Tiger tanks. The Tigers had first reached Tunisia in late November 1942, with 3 tanks arriving in Tunis on November 23, marking the combat debut of German heavy tanks in the region. Reinforcements continued to arrive through December and January, eventually bringing the battalion's strength to 20 operational Tigers. The Tigers' fearsome reputation had arrived before the tanks themselves. Soviet forces on the Eastern Front had first encountered these giants in January 1943 near Leningrad. Red Army accounts detailed a vehicle capable of destroying T-34 medium tanks at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The Tigers were armed with the legendary 88 gun, adapted from Germany's highly effective anti-aircraft weapon into a devastating anti-tank cannon. This weapon could pierce the frontal armor of any Allied tank at distances where Allied return fire was utterly futile. American forces received their first intelligence warnings regarding German super heavy tanks in early February 1943 via British sources. To soldiers familiar only with Panzer III and IV medium tanks, the description seemed inflated. Intelligence summaries outlined a tank weighing over 55 tons, protected by 100 mm frontal armor, and armed with a main gun lethal to Allied armor beyond 2 km. Many American tankers dismissed these accounts as British hyperbole or propaganda. The reality, however, would far exceed these early warnings. On February 14, 1943, German forces initiated Operation Frühlingswind, assaulting American positions at Faid Pass in central Tunisia. Components of the 21st Panzer Division, bolstered by Tigers from the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, struck Combat Command A of the U.S. 1st Armored Division. The engagement at Sidi Bou Zid on February 14-15 decisively demonstrated the Tigers' superiority. Combat Command C of the 1st Armored Division launched a counterattack on February 15 with 52 Sherman medium tanks. German forces had established a classic anti-tank ambush, with Tigers providing support from extended ranges. By the time Combat Command C disengaged, 46 of its 52 Shermans had been destroyed or disabled. A post-battle survey conducted 3 weeks later mapped the destroyed American tanks and identified the killing weapons. Surprisingly, only 1 Sherman had been struck by an 88 round, whether from a Tiger or a towed 88 anti-tank gun. The majority of losses were inflicted by 50 guns on Panzer IIIs or 75 guns on Panzer IVs. This analysis revealed that Tigers were present in relatively small numbers, yet their psychological impact vastly outweighed their physical presence on the battlefield. The Battle of Kasserine Pass, commencing February 19, 1943, marked the U.S. Army's introduction to large-scale combat against veteran German armor. Tigers took part in the offensive, albeit in limited quantities. American Sherman tanks, with their 75 guns, needed to close within 300 meters to have any chance of penetrating a Tiger's armor, and even then only from the flank or rear. Meanwhile, Tigers could engage effectively from 2,000 meters, immune to frontal assault. The psychological toll on American tank crews was profound. Army medical officers documented cases of tiger phobia among crews who had faced the German heavies. Merely hearing reports of tigers in an area prompted American units to demand extensive air support and artillery bombardment before advancing. This psychological multiplier amplified the tiger's tactical value far beyond its actual numbers. By March 1943, the U.S. Army had to develop specific training materials to combat tiger phobia within armored units. Intelligence summaries stressed that tigers were rare, had vulnerabilities, and could be countered with appropriate tactics. Yet these materials offered Sherman crews little practical advice for direct confrontations beyond the unsatisfactory recommendation to call in artillery or air support. The final stages of the Tunisian campaign in April and early May 1943 exposed another Tiger vulnerability. Mechanical failures, spare part shortages, and fuel supply issues immobilized more Tigers than Allied combat action. The 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion had arrived with 20 Tigers and 16 supporting Panzer IIIs. By late April, only a handful remained operational. The rest were abandoned or destroyed by their own crews during the German collapse. The battalion's war diary, seized by British troops and later shared with U.S. intelligence, chronicled the steady deterioration. December 1942 entries noted 20 operational Tigers upon arrival. By December 28, only 14 were operational, with 8 undergoing mechanical repairs. Spare parts were unavailable, and fuel supplies were inconsistent and inadequate for sustained operations. By January 30, 1943, just 11 Tigers remained operational. The diary highlighted that fuel shortages were becoming critical, as each Tiger demanded a continuous flow of fuel, lubricants, and spare parts that the German logistical network in North Africa could not reliably provide. March entries reported only 6 operational Tigers, the rest sidelined by mechanical failure or lack of fuel. Requests for replacement engines were denied, with headquarters stating that no engines were available in the theater. The April 20 entry captured the desperation. Allied offensives were shattering German lines, retreat orders were issued, but fuel was sufficient only for limited movement. Numerous Tigers had to be abandoned. Demolition teams were overwhelmed by the volume of equipment requiring destruction, ensuring some vehicles would be captured intact. Tiger 712 never received demolition charges. Its crew, confronting overwhelming Allied pressure and critically low fuel, deserted the vehicle in an olive grove near Tunis. Whether they expected demolition teams to later reach it, or simply fled for their own survival remains unknown. The chaos of total defeat left many such questions unresolved. Lieutenant S.J. Sue of the 104th Tank Workshop, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, formally documented the discovery of Tiger 712 on June 9, 1943. His report described the tank as fully functional and intact, positioned in an olive grove among other abandoned German vehicles, including at least 2 additional Tigers and 1 Panzer III. The grove seemed to have served as a field maintenance area, with 1 Tiger's engine covers removed. While demolition had obliterated 1 Tiger entirely, Tiger 712 remained untouched. The find electrified Allied intelligence circles. Colonel George B. Jarrett, head of the Foreign Material Branch at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, was notified that U.S. forces had secured an intact Tiger. This presented an unparalleled intelligence opportunity. For months, Allied troops had battled tigers without a complete understanding of their capabilities and limits. Now they had a specimen to examine, measure, test, and analyze in minute detail. The recovery operation itself highlighted the tiger's exceptional size and weight. Tiger 712 weighed 56.9 tons in combat trim. American M31 tank recovery vehicles, designed to retrieve 30-ton Shermans, were inadequate. Moving the Tiger necessitated multiple recovery vehicles, bulldozers, and other heavy equipment. The convoy transporting Tiger 712 from the capture site to the port of Tunis primarily moved at night to avoid any lingering Luftwaffe attention. Though by May 1943, German air power over Tunisia had virtually disappeared. Engineers had to evaluate every bridge for load capacity, and some roads could not withstand the combined weight of the Tiger and its transport trailer. A trip that normally took 4 hours required 3 days. At Tunis port, loading the Tiger onto a ship posed another engineering challenge. The combined weight of the tank and its shipping cradle exceeded 65 tons, demanding heavy-lift cranes rated for 70 tons or more. Port engineers found suitable equipment and loaded Tiger 712 onto the Liberty ship SS Samuel P. Bush for the Atlantic crossing. The voyage lasted about 3 weeks, with the ship docking at Norfolk, Virginia, in early July 1943. From Norfolk, Tiger 712 traveled via specially reinforced flatbed rail car to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, arriving in mid-July 1943. Aberdeen served as the U.S. Army's primary testing and evaluation center for ordnance and armored vehicles. Engineers and intelligence officers had spent months preparing, reviewing German technical manuals, translating operational documents, and compiling battlefield reports. Brigadier General Glaydon M. Barnes, Chief of Research and Development for Army Ordnance, issued explicit instructions to the Aberdeen testing teams. The captured Tiger offered a unique chance to evaluate the enemy's most dangerous tank in depth. Testing would be thorough, covering armor protection, weapon effectiveness, mechanical reliability, mobility, and crucially, logistical needs such as fuel consumption and operational range. Initial inspections revealed sophisticated German engineering. The Tiger used interleaved road wheels and torsion bar suspension, providing excellent weight distribution and cross-country performance. The Maybach-Alvar transmission offered 8 forward and 4 reverse gears, enabling the Tiger to reverse as quickly as it advanced, a valuable trait for defensive combat. The famous 88 MKW K36L56 gun could fire armor-piercing rounds at muzzle velocities surpassing 900 ms with outstanding accuracy. The Tiger's armor protection impressed American engineers. Frontal hull armor was 100 mm thick, frontal turret armor also 100, and the gun mantlet ranged from 120 to 200 mm. Side hull plates were 60 mm thick, with side superstructure armor at 80 mm. This level of protection made the Tiger nearly invulnerable to most Allied anti-tank weapons in frontal engagements. However, Aberdeen engineers quickly identified a serious concern in the German technical specifications. Fuel capacity and consumption data raised urgent questions about the Tiger's operational sustainability. The tank carried 532 liters, about 140 U.S. gallons, of fuel in 4 rear fuel tanks. The Maybach HL230 V12 engine generated 690 horsepower, substantial output, but only marginally adequate for the Tiger's 56.9-ton weight. Captured German operating documents stated an operational range of 195 km, about 121 miles, on roads under ideal conditions, and 110 km, about 68 miles off-road. These numbers immediately worried American engineers familiar with Sherman operational ranges. Even considering the Tiger's greater mass, the range seemed remarkably short. The testing program at Aberdeen ran from July 1943 through January 1944, 6 months of intensive evaluation covering all facets of Tiger performance. Fuel consumption testing received top priority because it directly impacted operational capabilities. U.S. military doctrine stressed mobile warfare, requiring armored units to operate deep behind enemy lines, sometimes hundreds of miles from supply depots. A tank with restricted operational range posed severe strategic limitations, regardless of its tactical advantages. Tests on paved roads at constant cruising speed validated the German specifications. Tiger 712 used approximately 195 liters per 100 km on roads, equating to about 1.2 gallons per mile. This yielded a theoretical maximum range of around 117 miles, with a full 140-gallon fuel load, closely matching the German claim of 121 miles. However, cross-country testing revealed drastically higher fuel consumption. Aberdeen's rough terrain course, incorporating hills, mud, sand, water obstacles, and other combat simulations, consumed 132 gallons over just 32 miles, leaving only 8 gallons from the original 140-gallon load. This represented fuel consumption of 4.125 gallons per mile, slashing operational range to roughly 34 miles under realistic off-road conditions. Combat simulation tests yielded even more alarming results. When test crews executed realistic combat maneuvers, rapid acceleration and deceleration, frequent direction changes, turret traversal, extended idling for observation, and intensive radio use, fuel consumption soared to 6.1 gallons per mile. Under these intense combat conditions, operational range dropped to approximately 23 miles before fuel exhaustion. The test results depicted a devastating strategic reality. The Tiger tank, while supremely capable in direct combat, could not maintain extended mobile operations. Its enormous fuel demand required continuous resupply on a scale that would burden any logistics system. In combat, a Tiger battalion would need huge weekly fuel deliveries merely to stay mobile. Aberdeen engineers calculated the logistical burden. Each active Tiger required roughly 1,502,000 gallons of fuel per week. A battalion of 20 Tigers needed 30,000 gallons weekly for the Tigers alone, not including support vehicles like half-tracks, trucks, and reconnaissance cars essential to battalion operations. For comparison, U.S. intelligence gathered fuel needs for Sherman-equipped units. A standard American tank battalion with 53 Shermans used about 65,000 gallons weekly, covering all battalion vehicles. German heavy tank battalions, with only 20 Tigers, required almost as much fuel for less than half the number of tanks. When support vehicles were factored in, German heavy tank battalions actually consumed more total fuel than Icon medium tank battalions, despite deploying fewer than 40% as many tanks. Colonel Barnes assembled the Aberdeen testing data into classified intelligence reports disseminated to all Army Armor Commands in October 1943. The reports affirmed that Tiger tanks possessed formidable combat capabilities, armor protection superior to all Allied tanks, and a main gun effective beyond 2,000 meters. However, a critical vulnerability had been identified. Fuel consumption restricted operational range to about 120 miles under ideal road conditions, dropping to 30-40 miles under actual combat conditions. German logistics had to provide uninterrupted fuel supplies, or the Tigers would become immobilized, and immobilized Tigers cannot fight. The reports advocated for strategies to disrupt enemy fuel supply lines as an effective means of neutralizing the Tiger threat. Intelligence officers correlated Aberdeen data with captured German supply documents, uncovering the full extent of Germany's logistical nightmare in supporting Tiger operations. The analysis indicated that German logistics in 1943–1944 could scarcely meet Tiger fuel demands even under favorable circumstances. With Allied air power methodically demolishing German supply routes, fuel shortages would inevitably cripple Tiger effectiveness. The Tiger's fuel appetite explained puzzling operational patterns Allied intelligence had observed throughout 1943. German heavy tank battalions seldom operated more than 30–40 km from established supply bases. Tigers shunned prolonged movements when possible, and they often adopted static defensive postures instead of pursuing beaten foes. This was not just tactical preference, but a logistical imperative dictated by limited operational range. Captured German unit war diaries from various fronts corroborated the analysis. The war diary of the heavy SS Panzer Battalion 101 in Normandy during summer 1944 recorded repeated fuel shortages. A July 8 entry noted outstanding combat results: 16 Shermans and 3 Cromwells destroyed for the loss of 1 Tiger to mechanical failure, but fuel supplies were depleted after just 4 hours of combat. The battalion sat motionless, awaiting fuel trucks as Allied forces withdrew. Pursuit was impossible due to the fuel shortage. A July 20 entry reported a 40% reduction in fuel allocation, with strict orders to conserve fuel. Tigers were confined to defensive positions only, with no offensive operations authorized until the fuel situation improved. The entry lamented that Europe's finest tanks were idle for lack of fuel. An August 6 entry noted 3 Tigers abandoned during the withdrawal from the Falaise pocket. All were mechanically sound, but had empty fuel tanks and no fuel available for movement. Demolition charges were set, but crews were unsure if they detonated properly. The crews evacuated on foot. British intelligence shared captured documents showing identical trends on other fronts. Records of the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion in Italy showed Tigers repeatedly immobilized by fuel shortages. Documents from the 5th SS Panzer Division wicking on the Eastern Front repeated the same narrative: combat effectiveness hamstrung by the inability to maintain fuel supplies. Wherever Tigers fought, fuel shortages curtailed their impact. By November 1943, U.S. intelligence had distributed tactical guidance based on Aberdeen's findings to all combat units. The guidance recommended that, when encountering Tigers, units should avoid direct frontal engagement where possible. Instead, they should maneuver to compel the Tigers to reposition. Every mile a Tiger moved devoured substantial fuel reserves. Prolonged maneuvering would rapidly exhaust Tiger fuel supplies. Immobilized Tigers could then be bypassed or destroyed with artillery and air support, avoiding risky tank versus tank battles. Training films produced in late 1943 incorporated the fuel consumption findings. One film, titled "Understanding German Heavy Tanks," plainly explained that the Tiger tank used roughly 3–6 gallons of fuel per mile, depending on terrain and tactical situation, while Sherman tanks used under 1 gallon per mile in most conditions. This meant American tanks could maneuver 5 to 6 times farther on the same amount of fuel. Crews were taught to exploit this mobility advantage by making Tigers chase American formations, burning precious German fuel, and then attacking when the Tigers could no longer maneuver effectively. The Normandy campaign in summer 1944 confirmed the Aberdeen analysis. As Allied forces burst out of the beachhead in July and August, German armor units found themselves unable to conduct mobile warfare. Heavy panzer battalions equipped with Tigers and Panthers were immobilized not by combat damage, but by empty fuel tanks. U.S. armored divisions advanced 130 miles in 7 days during the breakout. Tigers could not match this operational tempo even with full fuel tanks. Their actual combat range of 30–40 miles meant they could barely shift between defensive positions, let alone execute mobile operations across the battlefield. The liberation of France in August September 1944, supplied overwhelming physical evidence of the Tiger's fuel woes. Reconnaissance units discovered dozens of abandoned Tigers and Panthers along German retreat routes. Most showed little battle damage. All had empty fuel tanks. German crews destroyed what vehicles they could, but often lacked even the fuel needed for proper demolitions. Operational tanks were simply deserted when their fuel ran out. The Ardennes offensive in December 1944 catastrophically exposed the fuel crisis. German forces launched their final major Western offensive with strict fuel rationing. Each panzer division received fuel calculated for about 150 km of movement, with operational plans predicated on capturing Allied fuel depots for resupply. The plan failed utterly. American forces secured or destroyed the fuel dumps, and German armor ground to a halt across Belgium as fuel supplies vanished. Kampfgruppe Paper, the spearhead of the 6th Panzer Army offensive, advanced 60 km before fuel exhaustion halted all movement. The battle group included Tigers from the 1st SS Panzer Division. Soldiers in Staumont and La Glise reported Tigers littering the roadsides, immobilized by empty fuel tanks rather than combat damage. Major Hal D. McCown, a U.S. officer captured by Kampfgruppe Paper who later escaped, testified that German officers openly discussed the fuel situation. They were desperate to capture American fuel dumps. When U.S. forces retained the dumps, the German offensive foundered. McCown saw Tiger crews desperately siphoning fuel from disabled vehicles in attempts to get at least some Tigers moving. The fuel crisis was total and absolute. German records seized after the war revealed that fuel shortages dictated German operational planning from 1943 onward. Each Tiger consumed approximately 300,000 gallons of fuel over its average service life. That same quantity could have powered 7 Panther tanks or 18 Panzer IVs. Germany had opted for concentrated firepower over distributed capability, and paid the strategic price in operational paralysis as fuel supplies diminished. The final U.S. assessment, prepared by Army Ordnance in March 1945, concluded definitively that the Tiger I heavy tank represented an exceptional design in terms of individual combat performance, but a catastrophic failure in logistical sustainability. Fuel consumption of roughly 1.2 gallons per mile on roads, rising to 3.6 gallons per mile in combat, made the Tiger operationally unviable in protracted campaigns. German industry could manufacture these tanks, and the German military could staff them with trained crews, but German logistics could not adequately fuel them, especially under relentless Allied air attacks on supply lines. Post-war Allied interrogations of captured German tank designers and engineers revealed that Henschel engineers who developed the Tiger had raised concerns about fuel consumption during the design phase, but were overruled by military demands for maximum armor and firepower. Ermina Durs, a senior Henschel engineer, told Allied interrogators in May 1945 that engineers had calculated during design that Tiger fuel consumption would limit operational range to about 120 km on roads, and significantly less in combat. This was reported to vehicle procurement officers, who acknowledged the limitation, but insisted the Tiger's combat superiority would secure quick, decisive victories before fuel became a critical constraint. History proved them wrong. Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, whose competing Tiger design was rejected in favor of Henschel's, testified that both designs suffered from excessive fuel consumption. His design used a gasoline-electric drive that was even less fuel-efficient than Henschel's mechanical transmission. Engineers knew that no heavy tank weighing 55-60 tons could achieve acceptable fuel economy with 1942 technology. Yet military leadership demanded the heaviest armor and most powerful gun, irrespective of logistical consequences. The outcome was a tank that could dominate any single battle but could not sustain campaigns. The Tiger's fuel consumption became a staple case study in post-war military education. The U.S. Army Command and General Staff College used it extensively in logistics courses to demonstrate a fundamental principle. A weapon that cannot be sustained in combat is not an effective weapon, regardless of its tactical performance. The Tiger tank, despite its fearsome reputation and genuine tactical superiority, ultimately validated this principle through thousands of examples across the battlefields of Europe. Superior tactical performance without logistical sustainability equates to strategic failure. Tiger 712 remained at Aberdeen Proving Ground as a training exhibit until 1989, serving for 46 years as a tangible reminder of the importance of LOGIS. Ticks in armored warfare. The tank that had terrified Allied crews in 1943 became an instructional tool, teaching the vital relationship between tactical capability and strategic sustainability. Generations of American armor officers studied it, learning lessons about balancing firepower, protection, mobility, and sustainable logistics. In 1989, Tiger 712 was loaned to Germany for restoration and display. It eventually returned to the United States and now resides at Fort Moore, Georgia, formerly Fort Benning, as part of the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection. The left side of the hull and turret remain cut away for instructional purposes, exposing internal components to students. It stands as both a monument and a teaching aid, a testament to German engineering ambition that overreached logistical reality and strategic sustainability. The capture and testing of Tiger 712 yielded intelligence that fundamentally shaped Allied tank tactics for the rest of World War II. American tank crews learned that the dreaded Tiger had a vulnerability more consequential than any flaw in its armor layout. It gulped fuel at rates that made sustained mobile operations unfeasible when facing Allied air interdiction and systematic strikes on German supply lines. Comprehending this vulnerability enabled Allied forces to devise effective countertactics that neutralized Tiger advantages without needing equivalent armor or firepower. The understanding of Tiger fuel consumption influenced American tank design for decades. The M48 Patton tank, developed in the 1950s, achieved better than 1 mile per gallon despite weighing 47 tons and carrying a powerful 9mm gun. American engineers remembered that mobility hinges fundamentally on fuel efficiency, which demands disciplined engineering trade-offs among competing requirements. The lessons from Tiger 712 ensured that operational range remained a key design parameter for all subsequent U.S. armored vehicles. Modern main battle tanks continue this legacy of balancing firepower, protection, and mobility with sustainable logistics. The M1 Abrams tank, fielded in 1980, carries over 500 gallons of fuel and achieves about 0.6 miles per gallon, enabling an operational range exceeding 300 miles on roads. Despite being a 70-ton vehicle with a gas turbine engine, the Abrams retains sufficient operational range for deep strikes and extended mobile operations. Designers made sure that even the most powerful tanks could go the distance. This lesson was learned, in part, from Tiger 712. The story of Tiger 712 imparts an enduring lesson about military technology. Superior weapons require sustainable logistics to achieve strategic effects. The world's most powerful tank becomes worthless when immobilized, awaiting fuel trucks that never arrive. German engineering produced a tactical masterpiece in the Tiger, but German logistics could not support it in drawn-out operations against enemies who controlled the skies and systematically wrecked supply infrastructure. Allied forces mercilessly and efficiently exploited this vulnerability. The final judgment belongs to Colonel George B. Jarrett, who oversaw the evaluation of all captured German equipment during and after the war. His summary assessment in June 1945 encapsulated 3 years of testing and analysis. The German Tiger tank accomplished everything its designers promised tactically. It delivered superior armor protection, devastating long-range firepower, and excellent crew security. But it failed strategically because it violated a core military principle. Any weapon system must be sustainable in extended combat operations. The Tiger's fuel consumption, mechanical intricacy, and extraordinary logistical needs ultimately made it unsustainable in prolonged warfare. Germany built an army around weapons it could not logistically support adequately. The Tiger epitomizes this failure perfectly. Brilliant tactical capability cannot compensate for inadequate strategic logistics. The Tiger demonstrated this truth in the thousands of burned and deserted hulks littering Europe from Tunisia to Berlin. Tiger 712 now rests in climate-controlled storage at Fort Moore, Georgia. Its 88mm gun is forever silent. The Maybach engine that devoured fuel so ravenously will never operate again. Yet the lessons it imparted continue to echo through every armor school, every logistics course, every staff college studying modern mechanized warfare. The principles are timeless and universal. The tank that frightened Allied crews in 1943 became the instructor that molded modern armored doctrine, not through its impressive strengths, but through its greatest weakness. The Tiger could dominate any individual battlefield with superior firepower and protection, but it could not reach far-off battlefields, could not maintain extended operations distant from supply bases, and could not endure the systematic fuel starvation that Allied air power and logistical targeting imposed on German forces. A tank that can travel only 120 miles on a full tank under ideal conditions, and just 30 miles in combat, cannot win wars that span continents. Germany learned this lesson through thousands of abandoned Tigers from North Africa to Normandy, the Ardennes, and Berlin. America learned it through the systematic testing of Tiger 712 and constructed an armored force that emphasized operational sustainability alongside combat capability. In mechanized warfare, the side that can sustain operations across distance and time emerges victorious. The Tiger forgot that fundamental rule. History never excused the oversight. The capture and examination of Tiger 712 guaranteed that Allied forces fully grasped that firepower means nothing without fuel to reach the battlefield. Armor protection means nothing without mobility to exploit tactical successes. And the best tank in the world means nothing without the logistical infrastructure to maintain it across long campaigns in hostile territory under enemy air attack. Tiger 712 stands today as both monument and mentor, a monument to German engineering ambition that surpassed logistical reality and strategic sustainability, and a mentor teaching the enduring principle that warfare demands sustainable systems engineering, not just superior weapons. The most potent weapon becomes a costly, stationary sculpture when it cannot advance to the next battle. The Tiger tank proved that lesson conclusively and repeatedly on World War II battlefields. The Americans who captured and tested it absorbed that lesson thoroughly and embedded it into doctrine. Modern armored forces remember that lesson always. The 60-ton steel beast that once horrified battlefields now instructs quietly in a Georgia museum. Its greatest legacy to military history is not the enemy tanks it destroyed in combat, but the comprehension it offered regarding the indispensable relationship between tactical excellence and strategic sustainability. Within that paradox resides the entire story of Tiger 712, the most dangerous tank in the world, ultimately vanquished not by superior enemy arms, but by its own insatiable thirst for fuel, which German logistics could never sufficiently quench.